Hello. Welcome to the webinar titled Anytime, Anywhere, What You Need to Know About Remote Audits. This webinar is provided to you in collaboration with SGS North America and the Association for Contract Packagers and Manufacturers. The presenters today will be Jennifer Lott, Technical Director of Food, Pharmaceutical, Cosmetic, and Personal Care Products at SGS. Jennifer has over 25 years of experience in quality and safety management, system development, consulting, packaging, and laboratory management. She is also a Senior Food Safety Auditor and Trainer. Our second presenter today will be Murray Milton, Audit Manager at SGS Canada, Inc. Murray has over 37 years of experience in auditing, inspection within various business sectors, including product verification, security audits, and quality management system audits. He is also a lead QMS auditor, an approved FSR CAPA auditor, a chain of custody auditor, and an approved QMS internal auditor. And last but not least, as your host, my name is Warren Hanotsky. I'm the Regional Manager for SGS North America. I have over 24 years of experience in the certification and training industry. My focus is assisting food clients and packaging clients succeed through food safety certifications, supplier auditing, testing, and training services. I've been a chairperson with ASQ's, which is the American Society for Quality Milwaukee section, and involved in the Chicago and the Southeastern Wisconsin IFT sections. A little background in SGS. We have over 89,000 employees strategically located around the world. SGS works across 11 different industries, of which food and food packaging is the largest, with the widest geographical spread of expert food auditors and specialists. We work across the supply chains, providing specialized business solutions that improve quality, safety, productivity, and reduce risk. Our network of over 2,600 offices and laboratories help customers navigate an increasingly regulated world by offering local expertise on a global scale. Today, we are the world's leading inspection, verification, testing, and certification company, the leading provider of competitive advantage, driving sustainability and delivering trust, the globally recognized benchmark for quality and integrity. We continue to push ourselves to deliver innovative services and solutions that help our customers move their businesses forward, and we aim to remain in this position. Within SGS, there's a business unit titled Knowledge Solutions that has 5 areas of focus, starting off with certification, which helps ensure the quality and consumer safety in products and services. Some of those certifications are BRC, SQF, and FSSE 22000, all under the GFSI, globally recognized schemes with a packaging focus. Another area is titled training that helps improve employee competency and professional development. Another area that SGS focuses on is specific to customized audits, which helps assess and improve the performance of business operations, companies global-wide. We also offer a software platform titled Transparency One, which helps minimize supply chain risks by gaining visibility of your suppliers. And last but not least, SGS offers technical consultancy to help improve productivity and operational efficiency for companies worldwide. Question sometimes is, what makes SGS different? It is that we are truly a global organization with local expertise. We partner with industry leaders and regulatory associations like the CPA worldwide. We are truly an end-to-end partner for our clients, and we are the #1 global leader with offices spread in over 80 countries. As mentioned, this webinar is brought to you in conjunction with the CPA, the Association for Contract Packagers and Manufacturers. To give you a little background on them, they are the national not-for-profit trade organization for the contract packaging and contract manufacturing CP/CM industry. Members of CPA are comprised of the nation's leading CP/CMs as well as suppliers to the industry, performing all packaging functions from the glamorous to the hazardous and the simplest to the most complex. CPA members offer these packaging services to an extremely wide variety of consumer goods companies and brand owners. Members of CPA receive exclusive member benefits that help them grow their business, build their industry network, and gain access to industry education. To learn more, visit www.contractpackaging.org. With that background information said, let's kick off this webinar, starting with the agenda. First bullet is, what is a remote audit? We'll move on to how do remote audits work, followed by when or when not to conduct remote auditing. Then we'll touch on remote audit criteria. Continue on with getting ready for the remote audit, then remote audit consideration for auditees, and then next, general requirements for remote audits across all industries. And then last but not least, a takeaway. What's the good, the bad, and the unfortunate ugly of remote auditing? And finally, we'll have a Q&A session, so kindly hold your questions until then. And let's start off the webinar.
What is a remote audit? That's a good question. With COVID-19 and the global impacts that it had on our clients and the certification bodies around the world, it prompted us to look at alternate audit delivery methods. And we're obviously looking at conducting audits either partially or completely off-site using the client ICT. ICT indicates information and communication technology. You got to keep in mind that the accreditation bodies are the ones that would give us the green light to go ahead with it. Most of them have to date so far. Initially, there's a few stragglers. The types of ICT that could be used: MS Teams, Zoom, Skype, OneDrive, FaceTime, WhatsApp. Also, using a smartphone could assist with on-site tours, looking at the production areas, or even the interview process. It obviously promotes and fosters health and safety between all parties. One thing to consider is the audit plan, and everyone needs to be kind of ready for the audit. Like, for example, if you're looking at a purchasing process at 2 o'clock, there should be either a link or the responsible person ready for the interview and document sharing and that kind of stuff for the audit. If there's a multi-site team with several auditors on the team, you may need to have individual invites for the responsible party and the applicable auditor, just to kind of ensure smooth rolling of the interview process. Some people do share one invite and just have people come and go throughout the day.
Now we will discuss how the remote audit process works. There are several sequential steps that SGS follows to ensure the remote audit is planned and performed seamlessly. These steps include everything from the client requesting the audit to receiving their certificate. We will go into much more detail as we move through the presentation on each step. The first step is for you, the client, to request the remote audit. After SGS receives the request, you will be forwarded a self-assessment to complete to determine the feasibility of performing the remote audit. This assessment is intended to understand the types of work performed on site, the availability of staff to support the remote audit process, and the available ICT to be used. After the completed assessment is returned to SGS, a technical manager will review the responses, then look at the results of audits from previous years. We will review the maturity of the product quality management system, the number and types of nonconformities identified in the past, the available ICT to complete the audit, and then make a decision about the feasibility of a successful remote audit. Once the remote audit is approved, the next step is identifying the auditor and scheduling the audit. Then your big day comes. Your remote audit occurs smoothly and successfully. The final steps in the remote audit process are absolutely no different than with an on-site audit. You will receive the nonconformance report if any nonconformances are identified, and you will correct the nonconformances and provide the information required by the standard that's being audited to close out the nonconformances that were written. Lastly, you will receive your certificate and be good to go for the next audit in your cycle, whether it be surveillance or recertification. A quick recap for you. ICT is defined as the use of technology for gathering, receiving, storing, processing, analyzing, and transmitting information to optimize an audit's effectiveness and efficiency and to support and maintain the integrity of the audit process. Some acceptable technologies for conducting the remote audit include, but are not limited to, the use of smartphones, tablets, or other handheld devices, video cameras, and wearable technology. When remote audits are scheduled, SGS can use any number of tools that are available: Skype, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, etc. to host the audit, or we can accommodate using your own system. SGS prefers using the system the client is most comfortable and familiar with for a successful remote audit.
When to or when not to conduct a remote audit. You need to consider this aspect with the pre-planning of the audit. And one of the steps that we go through in North America is we use a local risk assessment form, which helps validate the site's readiness and capability to conduct this remote audit. And typically, the auditor would ask for some information ahead of the audit, just to some of the typical documentation, like maybe management review, the manuals or procedures, flow charts, maybe the risk registry, objectives, internal audits, that kind of information to help prepare and ensure that you have it. The auditor would do a trial test run between your ICT platform and the audit to ensure functionality. The last thing you want to do is wait last minute and have all these hurdles, so you want to make sure it's a good smooth process. When not to do the audit, I'd like to share an example of what was one time was done on a combined remote and local audit. It had to do with a medical device type audit where the client was in Mexico, but Mexico did not have local expertise auditors, so we needed to do a remote audit from North America. But what we did locally is we utilized a local auditor that had similar qualification codes to go to the site and kind of be the eyes and the ears for the remote audit, just to help validate some of the new production processes that were being implemented. Remote audit criteria. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we do a remote risk assessment to help validate and ensure the capabilities of this ICT between the client and our auditor. Some comments that come up are confidentiality. We do have, with all of our auditors, a non-disclosure, so that whatever is shared, like any audit, is between yourself and SGS. This risk assessment also supports that the client has been in operations of some kind, that there will be some information, data, people to audit and help substantiate a valid full audit. Another thing this risk assessment considers is our global procedures that were adapted for the COVID-19. And also it makes reference to some accreditation body requirements or mandatory documents that might have been issued in support of completing this remote audit. Typically, the default really is remote audits allow you to maintain and continue with your certification type audit without potentially causing a lapse or anything else in your audit cycle or your certificate. It's a viable tool, and just as a general note, I know in SGS last year, North America, we did well over 1,300 risk assessments to help us proceed through a variety of client remote audits, and pretty well everyone was successful.
After the remote audit is scheduled, your assigned auditor will be in communication with you to describe the process and the method of sharing information. Some clients connect using a web application that allows screen sharing and shares their documents and objective evidence in this manner. Others use a file sharing service and upload documents for review. No matter the manner in which documentation is shared, complete confidentiality is assured, and you do not have to be concerned about your information being shared outside of the remote audit. Once you've had the conversation with your auditor, your next step is to prepare and submit the relevant documents per your agreement with your auditor. A strong Wi-Fi connection will be necessary to conduct the remote audit to support the technology and the documents being shared.
Some of the remote audit considerations really is the pre-planning and the validation of the capabilities between the client and the auditor, just to ensure that they'll do a test run or a trial run ahead to ensure that it does function, it does meet the intent, and there's no hiccups, so to speak. If you do this pre-planning, that includes maybe getting some of the documentation, it could help support a backup plan in the event of some kind of IT or maybe Wi-Fi interruption during the audit. You might be able to call a cell phone and interview or review with the client some documentation, or even maybe email back and forth if there's questions and answers to continue the interview process. With the audit, you need to be flexible as anything with the audit plan, because curveballs could be thrown, but we need to complete the audit as planned, or in the event, the worst case scenario is if we can't complete the audit, we may have to come back or pick it up at a later date. Some potential challenges to consider could be health and safety requirements on the site where they may not allow individuals to talk and walk on the cell phone and the camera, just maybe for a line of sight type of issue. So they might implement a tag team approach of sorts where one person might do the talking and the other person might be ahead with a camera or vice versa to help ensure that everyone is safe as needed. The auditor needs also to consider reviewing the site map ahead, especially if they've never been to the facility. During the audit, walk the site tour, do a 360 degree with the camera so you can see the full area, and that might open up other areas that might be potential audit trails or reconfirm what the auditor was asking anyways. Some other challenges are when you're looking at small images like a calibration label, it might be hard to read anything on it from the camera on the floor. So you may need to pick up the tool, bring it to a quieter area, and possibly look at it under where it's a more cleaner, quieter area. Get maybe the user's name, serial number, whatever, for traceability. Maybe can link back to other data the client might be sharing with you. Other things that you might bring back to you from the production area if it's too busy is a travel or whatever the information the production or operators are using, and possibly interview in a quieter area to validate certain steps of the process of the operator that you may have witnessed them doing. Another thing that can happen is that a lot of people are working from home. You call on the site and the interviewee or the responsible party is working from home, and they may have lag times on their internet, or they may themselves have issues accessing their own site through their VPN, and that's where your main contact can possibly help you out if needed. The things to consider, and also production lines are noisy at times, and you may need to do the data, talk, and witness what you can, and bring information to that quiet area so you can complete the interview process.
I'd like to review a few takeaways from the remote audits that SGS has performed over the past year. A pro is that technology improvements have made remote auditing practically seamless. Between emails, teleconference, screen sharing, and webcam, it almost feels like we're sitting together in the same room. However, there is no substitute for in-person interaction between the client and your auditor. One potential issue I have personally experienced is technology issues. It can be faulty software, inexperienced users, burden on Wi-Fi, dropped calls, and background noise, the ever-present barking dog. It's highly recommended that at some point prior to the remote audit, You, your team that will be participating in the audit, and your auditor have a trial run with the technology you'll be using to work out any issues ahead of time. And always have a backup plan in case of failure. The audit must continue in the time frame planned. Remote audits have the potential to be an ongoing tool used in the future, especially the use of blended audits.
This information is included to help you understand the options available for GFSI recognized standards. SGS audits to the following three major GFSI standards in the U.S. and Canada: BRCGS, FSSC 22000, and SQF. I'm happy to say that the three CPOs, or certification program owners, have aligned on how remote auditing will be handled in the U.S. and Canada. Based on current information, all three standards allow for a full remote audit. However, and this is really big, a full remote audit is not recognized by GFSI, and SQF will only permit a full remote audit after a site has applied for a 6-month extension first. All three standards also allow for a partial or blended audit, where 50% of the time allocated for the audit can be completed remotely, and 50% of the time must be spent on site within 30 days of the remote audit. This type of audit, the blended, will be recognized by GFSI.
To wrap up our webinar today, I would like to share with you the top 10 nonconformances from remote audits performed over the past year by SGS. With most of the nonconformances, you will clearly see the impact of the pandemic and reductions in staffing. Number 10 was the recall program was not tested in the past year. Number 9, the supplier approval program missed required monitoring activities. Number 8, documentation and records. There were several issues associated with document revision control and completion of records. Number 7, customer complaints. Not following procedures for meeting timelines for responses to customers when they filed complaints. Number 6 was quality out of specification. It was centered around the usage of materials with no justification documented. Number 4, internal audits. There was demonstrated lack of impartiality of auditors performing audits. Number 3 was equipment. Calibration of PM programs were behind schedule. Number 2 was corrective action and preventive action. There was no evidence of verification of the effectiveness of actions taken. And the number 1 nonconformance was GMP. For audits using smartphones, we saw evidence of employees not following guidance associated with wearing gloves and hairnets to protect products. There were also findings associated with housekeeping programs with the technical standard program of FSSC 22000.
Thank you, Jennifer and Murray, for that insightful webinar on remote auditing. We appreciate your time spent in this very important matter. And now let's thank all the attendees for participating in this webinar, and we open it up to whatever questions that you may have. Feel free to share with us now. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Jennifer and Murray, for that, those details. I have seen a lot of questions come in, so certainly is a robust audience that has been attentive and have some questions, certainly for both of you. So let's just jump right in. If we can, both Jennifer and Murray, you can decide who wishes to answer and all that for these. And we apologize in advance. We may not be able to get to all of the questions, so certainly stay tuned. We'll do our best possible follow-up afterwards. One of the questions is, if you couldn't have a remote tour due to restrictions, environmental health and safety, confidentiality, would you go ahead? Could a set of photographs prepared in advance be used? So, Jennifer or Marie?
I would say that we are bound by the restrictions set forth by the certification program owner. So if they're saying that 50% of the time must be spent on site in order to do the certification audit that you're requesting, then we have to spend 50% of our time on site, and we will not be able to use pictures. So we really have to follow the rules that are set forth by the owners of the standards that we're auditing to. So what SQF or BRCGS or FSSC 22000 requires for a true certification. Murray, do you have any other you want to add?
Typically, it'd be a blended audit of some sort, like partially on and partially off. But you're right, you got to stick to whatever the technical requirements are for that scheme. And there's probably some may have a little bit of flexibility as far as the percentage on and off. Some schemes, but obviously the food schemes, as you mentioned, Jennifer, have the 50% commitment for on site. I have,
Great.
as a note, just as a general note, I have used cameras or images. I had one audit I did. It was a construction type project, and they used a drone, and they flew over the construction site. And it was very interesting and added value to your eyes and ears being at the site. It's kind of one example of using technology.
Using a drone, now that's interesting, right? It gives you a great quick overview of the facility and area. So interesting to see how that may continue to be utilized in years ahead, right?
Yep.
Another question is, what type of documentation might be asked to submit prior to a remote audit?
So from the food safety side of the business, we typically ask to see your risk assessment or your HACCP plan or your HERA plan, depending on which certificate you're going after. So we understand how you identify hazards and risks and look at that plan, look at mitigation strategies that you put in place, the process flow and layout of the organization, your organization chart, just to give us a feel for things that you had in place previously are still in effect and actively working. So we'd want to review those documents prior. And then once we get on the phone and we start our remote audit, we'll be asking you to demonstrate implementation records. So can we see some of the monitoring activities that you have and that you can demonstrate that your plans are working?
Yeah, I agree fully. The other comment I think we said during the presentation is the use of a site map can help an auditor that's maybe not as familiar with your location, or maybe the new auditor to the location, and that will help them just kind of get a general overview of what you're doing. And depending on the site map, you may even have the production lines, layouts, and that kind of stuff, and entrances and exits, and those type of components to the physical location.
Yeah, great response. Thank you. For a remote audit, what are the thoughts on breaking up the audit time into, for example, 4-hour segments versus a straight or 8 or 10-hour day? I know there's some accreditation guidelines that we have to work within, so I don't know how flexible we can be in that. But any comments, Murray?
I know typically for I'll call it core audits, which is quality, health and safety, environmental. Typically, it's an 8-hour audit day on site. That's very common. But during the day, when you're doing the remote audit, you may not actually be talking to each other for that 8-hour period. You may have submitted documentation for the auditor to review in response to some queries they may have had. So there could be some back and forth between it. And the longer the audit duration is probably more possible that the auditor will need time to review, update reports, and even come back with some questions. So you see quite often some give and go throughout the days.
And it's the same thing on the food safety side. where there is some give and go like that. And what we're bound to by the end of the audit is that we've met the required time on site or time for the audit between on site or off site. So as long as we're meeting the man hours that we're supposed to be present or involved in the audit, we'll be fine, even though we may spend some time where we're not actively communicating and we're reviewing documents and making notes.
Sure. Right. Here's an interesting question. How many companies are either of you seeing putting it to practice during internal remote audits? So I think, what are you seeing as remote internal audits being prevalent in this current climate?
I'm working with a packaging company that is headquartered out of Canada, and they have several sites in the U.S. And their corporate audit team is actually taking advantage of remote auditing to do some of the internal audits that they do throughout the year at each one of their sites. Because a large part of auditing is reviewing documents and looking at implementation records. There still is that piece where you have your boots on the ground and you're walking around and you're verifying that things are the way they should be in the facility. But the things that can be reviewed over, Skype or Teams or such, they're taking full advantage of that so that they can complete what they need to do to meet the requirements of their quality management system.
And I fully agree. Also, I remember about a year ago when the COVID came out and the remote auditing methodology was being first implemented. A lot of clients were not that familiar with like MS Teams. They may not have used it as well, so there could have been some glitches or hiccups at the beginning, and a lot of them may have still done initially some of the on-site audits, but definitely I have seen a lot more as the time's gone on that where they can do an on-site, they're still doing on-sites, and they kind of prefer that. But I've seen both.
Excellent. This is an important question. I get that often too from clients that are considering, certifications, recertifications, and surveillance audits and such. And I think this is probably one of the most popular questions is, how do you manage the confidentiality or proprietary of information during remote audits?
Well, that was covered in some of. Go ahead, Jennifer.
No, please go first, Marie.
Okay. We do have some global procedures that were issued specifically in regards to COVID-19 and client confidentiality. As all of our auditors, whether they're full-time or subcontractors, have all signed NDAs, so they will not. They're still bound by that document. I did an audit yesterday, and the client sent me some information ahead, like management review, business plans, their SWOT analysis, all that kind of stuff, risk register. And his only condition was that I confirm when I deleted the audit, the information that he sent me, and when I issued him back his audit report, I put a qualifying statement on all your records have been deleted from my computer. So they don't specifically ask for that, but we do that. I mean, you don't really need it after the audit anyways.
And I agree with Marie's comment. Sometimes we use file sharing services, things like Dropbox or OneDrive with the Microsoft Office platform. And when clients are sharing documents with us using Office sharing platforms, document sharing platforms like that, they can set security arrangements, so it can't be copied, can't be printed, can't be that, so that they're there for review and you control the document. So once the audit is over, you take it down, you close the folder, you remove the people who have access to it, and that way you can ensure confidentiality as well.
Super. Thank you. Interesting question here. How do you promote strong rapport with attendees during a remote audit?
I think the scheduling team in the office, they will try to assign the same auditor that was there previously, where possible. Some schemes, they do have a maximum amount of audits that you're allowed to go consecutively, so they have to rotate auditors in and out anyway. But as part of I guess auditor makeup, for lack of words, is that kind of approachability, and you'll miss the face-to-face on-site for sure, irregardless. It's never going to be 100% the same, but I think you can still create that atmosphere of kind of like a positive atmosphere where we're discussing open dialogue, sharing information. We're all on the same page when you think about it. We all want to get through a successful audit and go through it as diligently as we want. We want it to carry the weight that it should, whether you're on site or not. And I think that it seems to work. I haven't heard of any specific negative feedback from that specific question, but I think it's like, even if you change the auditor, here's the new auditor, what's he or she going to be like, even if it's on site? I mean, it's the same kind of questions, and people are people, right?
I agree, Murray, and I think that, in the remote environment, we have to be flexible because things happen. I was actually being witnessed earlier this week, and at one point I dropped the internet connection, and my witness auditor, who was in the UK, lost the connection for a while, and so it's like, okay, now we're going to go to the phone, and we're going to use the phone for a while. And you need to be flexible when things happen. And you also, as an auditor perspective, when I'm asking my questions, I need to be, as Murray said, very personable. And when I get good information or they answer the question very well, I'll say, great, you get a check mark. And just try to make it a little less dry. And, letting the clients know that we are people too, and that we're not machines, and we're there to, look at their system, but also provide them feedback when it's good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, I think the important part is everybody's in the same boat, right? So everybody's trying to work together to, move forward and ensure the integrity of the certification and ultimately, either have a successful surveillance audit or recertification, right? So I think that's the important part for everybody to keep in mind. Good question here is, as it relates to, for example, SGS being the auditor, does SGS choose the samples for an audit, or does the company choose the samples?
I'd probably like to use the word random.
Right. And, for the food safety audits, it's the auditor who chooses the sample. And as Murray said, it's very random. And when I choose my sample when I'm auditing, for all of the food safety audits that I perform, I am required to do a traceability study while I'm on site. So I randomly choose a traceability item, and then I ask for other information to support other parts of the program based on the item I chose for traceability. So if I was doing a traceability on something that was produced in August, I would say, can I see the PM records for the equipment this was run on for this 3-month period around the date of when I did the traceability? So as I write my report, you'll be able to see that it kind of comes together and things fit together very well, and how it all makes sense that we picked, we based it on this one random sample that we pulled.
Yeah. Murray,
yeah.
A comment?
Just to also add to that, it's very important at the opening meeting when you're discussing the topics of the days or the audit plan with the client, changes, depending what those changes are, could impact the audit. And that is irregardless to on-site or remote. Like, for example, if you're during the audit, they say, oh, we made a huge extension here, we've added a couple of lines. Oh, okay, how many? You may have to go back and kind of, do we have enough time for this audit? So anytime the auditors come across changes in the field, they will call the office back just to update our records and validate the timing of the audit. And maybe you may need to return if you don't have it. If it's a significant change, you may need to come back at a later date to complete it. It depends on the scheme. But that's why it's so important to cover changes. And I've done many audits where the client might say, oh, not really much changes, and as you're talking, you're scribbling points down on a scrap piece of paper, and you got a fairly full page of a bunch of little things. And a lot of them actually relate to continuous improvement, which is great.
Very true, very true. Here's a question in particular, a little bit more for you, Jennifer. What is the time window for completing stage 1 and 2 remote and on-site respectively in regards to FSSC 22000? Jennifer, you there?
I muted myself, I apologize. So typically with stage 1 and stage 2 in FSSC 22000, we like to have the time between the 2 audits be less than 3 months. And the reason we ask for less than 3 months is that we want to make sure that systems do not change so dramatically in the time period between the documentation portion and the implementation portion that we don't have to go back in at stage 2 and do a whole bunch of documentation review because of updates that may have been made that were not called out as issues in stage 1. So we look for a 2 or 3 month period and nothing more.
Sure. Question here, I think we answered this, but just the same to make sure that it's clear. Can the virtual tour be pre-prepared, so obviously recorded, or does it need to be live on the specific day? I think the answer is yes, but Jennifer?
So within the food safety realm, we need for it to be live and in person, so no pre-recording, because it may be that you're walking through the area and if there is something that the auditor wants to see because they have an interest, they'll say, oh, can you look up or raise the camera up or down, where if it's pre-recorded, then we're not going to be able to do that. But again, it comes back to, even if you're doing virtual tours as part of the remote portion of it, all the GFSI food safety audits that we do in the U.S. and Canada require that time on site where we're actually going to be walking through your facility. And there may not be a need for the device to look at, your facility in the remote portion.
Right.
And I think even for the non-food audits, it would still be the much preferred. You want to see things live in real time. You don't really go back and on historical data because you might not get the information that you're really looking for. So live interview, live site tour, wherever. Like I think all of mine have been done that way. I don't think any have been any other way. Sorry.
Sure. A question a little bit more for Murray, but I think it's applicable also to you, Jennifer, too, on the food side. Would a blended audit be required if cameras aren't allowed in a GMP product loading area at an ISO 9000 certified chemical plant? Murray, let's start off with you.
This is one of ISO 9000.
Yeah, for 9000, I'd say that probably would be a blended audit for sure. You could validate quite a bit of stuff remotely. That you could probably leave the on-site portion, say that area that you're talking about, that area that's CCTV or cameras that are not allowed, and that could be for safety or security reasons, client preference. They wouldn't really qualify for a full remote in that scenario. They would be a blended.
Jennifer, did you have some comment on that?
No, I was just saying if it's ISO 9000, Murray's the subject matter expert.
Right, I understand. This is a good question to continue on that line of thought. What are the key risk questions you consider in deciding if a remote audit is possible?
Give me 1 second on that one.
On the food safety side, I'm looking at the maturity of your food safety management system and your past performance. So we have guidelines about how many majors or minors or nonconformities you could have had in past audits and how your company has performed in audits. So that's one of the things that are key when we're looking at it. Plus, if you've had any recalls or withdrawals or incidents such as that.
Yep. And even on top, or the other parts I might consider would be, you kind of touched on it. How have they done in the prior cycle? Have they had any suspensions or issues that we should be aware of? Were there a lot of major, and I think you have even critical nonconformities, that might support more to going back on site, depending what it was, the timeliness of it. Have they been in production? Are they fully shut down? If they're fully shut down and there's nothing really to look at, it may not be a viable audit, to be truthful. You'd like to know, have they been in production of some kind? It might be limited, but have they been, we need something to look at and to interview and validate the scope statement to the scheme, right? Also, very, very critical is the ICT platform. Early on, when this pandemic had, a lot of my clients maybe were not as familiar with it. They had to get their IT people help to install maybe MS Teams or Zoom or whatever they happen to be using, and they weren't familiar on the usage of it. And you spend the time in that pre-planning component, as I mentioned earlier, the contacting the client, go through that, test the system, make sure it works. And if it doesn't work, you can't get it to work, well, then you really can't really do a remote audit. I haven't seen that it can't work. I've seen lots where people are just, it's new to them and they weren't familiar with it. They did manage to get it for the functionality of it. Other challenges just on the remote side are sometimes the size. If you're looking at a production line, you're trying to get the little camera and the guy's walking down the line, and what you see on your screen is a small image, and it might be very, very hard to read or to get the specifics that you're looking for if you're trying to pick up a serial number or a date, that kind of stuff. And then that can make it a challenge too, or it's just production lines can be noisy. You may not be able to hear each other talk. The individual that's on the line may have a phone, he may have a headset on, but he may not even hear your questions that well. So you may need to kind of go back and forth between the line, grab some information, interview the process owner. I did that at I think some kind of paper making plant, and it was just too noisy on the floor. So you'd grab the docket, the travelers, and the operator for a brief interview, and you go and you get what you need as an audit. You interview to you have that kind of satisfaction level that you achieved that process, that part of that process that you're trying to validate. But there could be a few times back and forth for sure, depending on the environment you're auditing in.
Great. This is a good question, and I would say this is for those type of audits where typically is required more than one auditor because of duration, for example. Do you use breakout meetings if there is more than one auditor? So how do you structure execution of something like that? Jennifer, let's start with you.
So what we will typically do is we will define the audit plan and send an audit plan that says how we're going to approach the audit. And based on the audit plan and the individuals that need to be involved, we can use breakout sessions. We could start up another team's meeting if we're talking with the purchasing group in a purchasing area. So we try to be flexible so that we're able to share the information and get what we need in a very effective and efficient manner.
I've done a couple audits where it's been a multi-team and it's broken up exactly like that. And the client even opened a meeting room just for the audit team to chat in without anybody else in it. If you had any updates or any need to kind of get back together, you could do that. I mean, you can always, the worst case scenario, you can either text the auditor if you want, if we need to talk, and kind of if there's something urgent. But they have done a lot of ways to accommodate the audit, and it doesn't, like I've seen many, like you'll have the audit day on your calendar and you'll see so many timelines, like an hour chunk for this and so on. And I may not see the chunk that you're, Warren, for example, if you're the auditor, you may have at 9 o'clock or something, you're talking to somebody else. I won't see it in my calendar, but I'll see whatever's being divvied out to me following the audit plan. So that way we ensure that we kind of cover what needs to be covered with the team, and definitely multiple meeting rooms would help in that scenario for sure.
Sure. This is kind of a technology question. So curious what both of you have experienced thus far. The question is, as well as drones, mobile phones, what other technology have you seen used for the virtual tour?
I think for me the drone was the most interesting because I've only seen it. I've seen it twice, and they're both large construction projects. Like they're doing highway construction, so you had to cover quite a distance. And in those cases, their clients, it was with the Ontario government at the time, and they wanted monthly drone updates. So I could say, let's go have a look at what you submitted to the client for half a year ago, just to see what the weather impacts could have been on the site at that time. Where were you? And they could see live. It's really, I found that really interesting, very innovative, so to speak, that approach. But really, most of it's being smartphones or iPhone, tablets, meeting rooms. That's kind of, and obviously cell phones and whatnot, kind of normal or standard type technology is kind of what I've kind of dealt with the most. How about you, Jennifer?
I've not experienced drones yet, so you're way ahead of me on that one. But oftentimes it is tablets, or it is an iPhone, or there's a tool that SGS has that's called Quick that we can use to do the videoing and looking around at a facility. But it's been your typical video devices that are available that I've seen used.
Yeah, that's all too.
Yeah. Here's a particular question. How far out can I push my audit? So I guess it all depends on the respective schemes, but Murray, we can start with you with that kind of question.
Yeah, you're right. It depends on what the accreditation body or I forget what they call it, Jennifer, but the scheme owner, what they've allowed, and they're not uniquely, they're kind of unique, so they're not all the same. So for some accreditation bodies, they might have allowed 6 months, for example, and they would allow that, but then allow that to push it out to 6 months. That was kind of where we had last year, especially in the summer or the spring, when everyone was kind of like really unsure of, do I really want to see an auditor? Does the auditor really want to see me? This is new and scary, and it definitely is and was. And so that at that time, the accreditation body came out and allowed a 6 month push out as long as it was completed by the end of the calendar year. So that obviously caused us a bit of a bottleneck last fall, and I was auditing every single day, and I don't normally audit every single day, but yeah, we were pushed to the max. We managed to get them done, but everybody was doing everything possible to make sure those. It was almost like a double up time frame. The fall, you did your regular schedule, and during the summer and spring months, you picked up what couldn't have gotten done to ensure that everyone is done by the end of the year. And I'm pretty sure, at least on the programs I'm involved with, we managed to succeed.
We had the same experience on the food side, where we were really pushing hard at the end of the year because most of the food standards allowed us to do a 6 month extension. So we were pushing really hard to get clients, help them maintain their certification by doing the blended audits. So things have gotten a little bit easier now. One of the things about being an auditor is that you're considered an essential employee. And most of us who had to travel and do audits, we have been COVID tested so many times, we just know to go in and open our mouth and hold our tongue a certain way so they can get the swab where they need it, or lift your face up so they can get into your nasal cavity. But we are definitely out there supporting the business as best we can and meeting the needs of the program owners, the certification program owners, and our clients.
Right. And one thing it's always kind of in the back of the mind is the safety of the people involved. You got to feel safe when you do anything, whether it's the customer or the auditor. That's why it's also important during that risk assessment that they have the controls in place that are related to the COVID-19 in the case of an issue. But it's typical. You follow the basic stuff like the distancing, the mask, the cleanliness, all those kind of standard normal process that you do, even on your personal life. If you're going out and going to the grocery store or something, you want to keep yourself safe as much as possible. The same mentality would apply to the audit, I guess.
Sure. I think just one more, two questions here. One in particular, I know we've already talked somewhat about this, but I think it's a good question to kind of recap. Have you ever had to stop a virtual audit as the tour was not available to the standards you needed? Or would you then change to a blended audit?
Thinking of it from the quality side, if there was any change to the site setup, the office needs to be advised, and it very well may end up being a blended audit, like you're commented on. But we need to do our due diligence and complete what needs to be done for that audit. It might require a return visit or return remote to ensure that all areas that need to be audited have been audited. But I could see a blended audit possibly using that approach.
Right. And, and to Murray's point, the back office is very much involved in understanding what the requirements are and how we schedule these audits. So if it's a food audit to GFSI, then we know very much that it's going to be a blended audit, and that's how we approach it. So we don't stray from the rules set forth by the program owners.
Okay. One last quick question. I guess it all depends on the answer. Most staff are working from home, and our production is not currently running. What can we do to maintain our certification? I think that's a very key question. Murray, let's start with you.
Yeah, I have people. Typically, a lot of people are working from home, and that itself can bring challenges. I was doing one the other day where the individual, and they were more of a service sector. They weren't a production facility, and the person I was talking to, they could not access their internal operating system. Their VPN would not work for her. So I managed to get the information with the help of the person that was the key contact on site, but the remote person contributed more verbally, couldn't drive the ship, so to speak, but could get the answers that we needed. So that was a challenge. We got through it though.
Jennifer, any final comment?
No, I think Murray covered it very well.
Right. Well, we're coming to the top of the hour. A lot of questions. So I wish to thank both you, Murray, and Jennifer for a very insightful and very comprehensive overview of remote auditing and how it is impacting the certification industry. And certainly want to thank the Association for Contract Packagers and Manufacturers that is co-hosting this webinar. And overall, on behalf of all of SGS and the CPA organization, I wish to thank you, the audience, for participating in this webinar. Certainly stay tuned. You'll see a follow-up email with a copy of the slides, and certainly there will be more related webinars in the future. Feel free to keep in mind of SGS. We are the world's largest and oldest food safety certification, testing, and inspection company with a tremendous amount of resources to help support your efforts in 2021 and beyond. So with that, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.